I did the same thing.
What'd you do?
I also did the point.
Welcome in, fools, to episode 35. We are at 35, and today we actually have a little bit of a surprise. Not really a surprise, kind of just, no, it is a surprise. And on today's episode, which is the 35th episode of the Fantasy Fools podcast, we actually are going to give you 2 episodes this week. The first one today, 35, we're going to talk about news, injuries. We're going to go through Trifecta. And we're going to go into our week 4 rewind, where we want to talk a little bit about those fantasy relevant news that happened in week 4, some of those big games, those awful games. I'm talking about you, Jets, Broncos. And we're also going to dive into our week 4 Duel of the Fools results. So, and then, but wait, there's more. Then later this week, we're going to drop a second episode for you where we are going to go over our week 5 preview. And,
what?
And we talk about week 5 preview. We're going to talk about those matchups that we're looking forward to, the players that you're going to want to start, sit, flex, and dive more into the actual upcoming week of football. But let us begin by starting it off with some news happening around the NFL. Jordan, kick us off.
All right. So a few things that we got going on. Nick Chubb getting activated to the practice squad. I'm pretty pumped about that. I got him in a few leagues. I've seen a video of the man squat 540 pounds post-surgery, which is insane. Then you've also got Davante Adams requesting a trade. Where's he going to go? I'm pretty confident he's not going to the Chiefs, just because why would the Raiders trade with a divisional rival? And I don't know, maybe the Rams, maybe the Jets. And then you also got Amari Cooper, who did restructure his contract.
Yeah, the Amari Cooper restructuring, I think, is actually really intriguing. He is rumored to be highly looked at by the Chiefs, and I will admit, in a Dynasty League, I just traded for him yesterday. So we'll see.
You know, and I want to dive in really quickly onto the Davante Adams news. This guy is just disappointing me with how he acts on this Raiders team. The Raiders aren't the worst team right now in football. They're 2-1. Are they 2-2 now?
I believe they're 2-2 now.
Raiders are 2-2. Davante Adams missed last game and they still won. He also severely underperformed. We talked about this last week on Trifecta, but he severely underperformed against Carolina. I'm sorry, buddy, but this is a great shot, especially with a guy as your quarterback who loves to throw the ball, and he's still working through that shell, but I do believe it'll come.
You know what the truth of it is that he wants to be on a championship caliber team, and because he's 31 and he's never won a Super Bowl.
I agree with that. I do. I think he and everybody around the NFL has seen there's an opportunity and an open window with the Chiefs, who have they're going for a three-peat. They're clearly in a win now mode, and they lost their top receiver. I think that's kind of the reason why Cooper has his restructured contract, so the Browns had a little bit of flexibility, and so that way maybe Davante Adams is trying to beat him there.
But you even look at the Raiders. They are in their division. They have the second most points for. Yes, they have the most points against, which they need to definitely shore up their defense. But they're in playoff contention right now because their opponents are the Broncos and the Chargers. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to win a Super Bowl, but they're going to make the playoffs. Or they have a chance.
I think you're downgrading the Chargers.
I think he goes to the Jets and they win Super Bowl.
That's another hot take. Honestly, I think that I could easily see that him and Rodgers merging again, but we'll see. What would that do to Garrett Wilson? I guess we'll talk about it later. But we got to jump into the injuries right here. So I'm going to go through this. Unfortunately, it was a really rough week. Let's start off with exactly what we already mentioned, right? Rashee Rice. It's feared that he tore his ACL. It is not confirmed. I'm actually surprised that today, at the end of the day on Tuesday, that we haven't heard yet for sure, but it is a big fear, and everybody's kind of gearing up to lose Rashee Rice, not only for the season, but potentially into a little bit of next year. Anthony Richardson ended up getting injured with a hip injury. He's only day-to-day. Interesting thought, he apparently is like dealing with something that is considered to be a pain tolerance thing, and he's already out. So there might be more at play here. We can talk about it later. On the same team, Colts got really beat up. Jonathan Taylor, high ankle sprain. He was playing through it for a little bit. We'll see if it's going to affect him. I do anticipate he's out for a couple of weeks at least. Mike Evans with a knee and calf injury, not too bad. He played a little bit, but again, something to monitor. Will slow him down. Something else that's going to slow down a superstar here, Bijan Robinson with a hamstring injury. This one I think is rough, just because hamstring injuries, especially for running backs, they really kind of stop you from really doing a whole lot. Christian Watson with another high ankle sprain. That's just Christian Watson being Christian Watson. He can't seem to stay healthy. Other notable guys, Malik Neighbors with a concussion. He might be week to week, but luckily he had the long break. So maybe he can go from Thursday Night Football to next Sunday. Maybe that'll actually work. Travis Etienne hurt his shoulder. He did play through it for a little while. Hopefully he's not going to be too bad. And some lesser fantasy relevant injuries. Not that anyone wants injuries, but Josh Allen had some soreness. He's day-to-day. He'll be fine. That's exactly what the coach says. But on a better news, we had some notable returns from injuries as well. I'm talking Kenneth Walker, Jordan Love, George Kittle, Justin Herbert, Jordan Addison, and Deebo Samuel all came back and played for their teams.
Yeah, definitely a lot of really relevant injuries. We saw Mahomes try and take out his only wide receiver. There's a lot of that was a big one. I think that was the most surprising injury this week, and that hurts everyone's roster. Rashee Rice was high value.
Injuries are always high. They're always surprises, right? But like that one just, I think, hurt the most. I agree with you there.
Man, what sucks for Rashee Rice, just like as a player, he's a young guy who's probably playing the best football he's ever going to play in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to miss the rest of this season, possibly all of next season. So it might be 2 years till we see him on the field again.
Yeah, and it hurt mostly because this happened in the first quarter. And that just really screwed all of your fantasy weeks. The Chiefs are going to trade for somebody.
Gave me a solid 0 in a couple leagues.
Yeah. But anyway, that was our news and injuries. Thank you, Mike and Jordan, for going over that with us this week. And now we're going to dive into our weekly Week 5 trifecta. Starting off, what?
Where are we driving?
We're driving? Did I say driving?
You said we're driving. Yeah, you said driving. It's okay. We're diving into it.
We're diving. Yes, we're diving. Head first. Woohoo! Starting off with my surprise of the week, and I couldn't pick between two, but I'm going to give you guys two. And the first one is Kenneth Walker Jr. This guy just blew it out of the entire stadium. He absolutely killed it. 59% snaps, 12 rushing attempts for 80 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had 4 catches with 5 attempts for 36 yards. He absolutely came back. What surprised me was the matchup. The Lions, notoriously good against running backs, but Kenneth Walker, especially just off injury, surprised me the most. And I'm going to give you a chance to talk about it in a bit, but my second pick has to be my boy, J-Red Goff. He had, I think, a legitimate perfect week as a quarterback. If he didn't get the highest quarterback rating possible, I don't know how he could have. He was 18 for 18, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he even had 1 receiving touchdown.
I know. That was the craziest part. All right, you guys all saw the bet I made on FanDuel, and I was so pissed. When I saw that Amon-Ra had a touchdown and Goff was involved, I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. To find out it was the other way around, and Amon-Ra threw it to Goff, and I didn't get a passing touchdown credit, I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Oh, it was awesome.
The Lions looked so good. Goff looked like this is the guy they paid him to be. And he also looked like who we knew he could be. And it's week 4. So it's kind of the week that we're going to see teams that, should have been playing better by now, kind of be like, okay, they got the rust off like the Lions we saw this week. But it's also around the time that we're going to see those teams fall off that aren't legit contenders. Like the Saints. They had a bad game. The team who hasn't done it yet is the Vikings. I'm starting to feel like they're more and more for real.
I love that you brought up the Vikings, and we will get back to that when we get down into our breakdowns. But I'm going to move on to my surprise of the week. I had the one, the only DeAndre Swift, baby. Like, I know I always liked him, and you know what? Like he deserves a lot of the hate he gets because he does have a terrible record at actually breaking through tackles. But man, he was not touched, and he broke through this week. I mean, he had just shy of 100 yards on 16 carries and a touchdown, on top of the fact that he got 7 receptions on 7 targets for another 72 yards. He was RB3 on the week, and he just looked great. Is it sustainable? I don't believe so, but I do want to highlight him when I can.
Yeah, consistency's not there, but he's not a bad player to have on your roster. He's just not the most trustworthy guy.
Going into bye weeks, I agree.
Which also you could say about my guy who I chose as a surprise. I chose Justin Fields, number 1 quarterback on the week. He had an awesome week. He had 1 passing touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns, over 300 passing yards, and 0 interceptions. Like, if I read that stat line to you, you're not thinking that's Justin Fields. That's just not the way he typically plays. But he had an awesome game. I'm really hopeful this is a sign of things to come because I just stashed him away in my Dynasty League and it's kind of working out. But I don't think this is a consistent thing. Same with DeAndre Swift. I think that Justin Fields has a very high floor and he's going to compete to be a QB1 top 12 this season, but I don't think he's going to be top 3 every week.
Before we move on to our consistency, I actually want to piggyback off of your consistency or off of your surprise and say he's been more consistent than you think. He's actually the number 6
but it's
on the
surprising.
season
It's
QB.
still surprising.
Absolutely, it qualifies as surprising, but he's the number 6 QB on the season, and he was QB1 this week. I thought, honestly, it's shocking, but he's actually looking really good for the Steelers. And you know what? Mike Tomlin, baby.
It was nice to see him finally throw the ball because that definitely has helped him the past 2 weeks. But moving on, my consistent, and I can't believe I am saying this, but my consistent of the week is Baker Mayfield.
Mayfield?
Who would have thought? 30 completions, 47 attempts, 347 yards. He had, 2 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. He absolutely shredded that Eagles offense. Good for you, Baker. Keep doing your thing. You are definitely performing at a level that no one thought you would perform at. Currently the third ranked quarterback on the season. So keep it up, man. Good for you.
Really earning that contract, which I think is absolutely fantastic for him. I mean, I think everybody loves to see Baker Mayfield succeed. I know I love seeing this guy succeed, though, and this is my consistent of the week. I was really high on him going into it. I totally understand why other people may not have been, but Kyren Williams, baby, like Blake Corum, who's that? Their 3rd round pick guy who they just got to be their next future running back. Nah, this is a Kyren Williams show, baby. 19 carries, 94 yards and a tutty, 4.95 yards per carry, and 4 receptions for another 10 yards in week 4. And not to mention, he's RB4 on the season. He's doing it all season long. He is the entire focal point of that offense.
Yeah, he's been really awesome. Someone that I think is just a fantastic player, as Tyler was talking about that team earlier, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, this is the 3rd week in a row. He has over 17 points in half PPR. Why I chose him as my consistent is he had a bad week 1, but weeks 2, 3, and 4, he's playing consistently what you drafted him to be. So he is really, I think he's finally playing up to his potential ADP. He's also going to have some boom moments.
Yeah, I'm with you there. My fool of the week is none other than James Cook. Had a terrible performance. He was on the field for 56% of the snaps, only 9 attempts for 39 yards, 1 reception for 9 yards. The Bills got stomped on by the Ravens. They had to throw the ball because they were so far behind, and they did absolutely nothing with it. This is the first time we saw the Bills look real bad. The second time, the Cardinals game wasn't great for him, but James Cook, you were the fool of the week, my friend.
Quick yes or no.
He was. Yeah, go on, Jordan.
Sorry, quick yes or no question. It's very possible that between James Cook and Josh Allen, we just saw their worst fantasy week of the season. What do you think the chances of that are? As a James Cook or Josh Allen owner, are you
high?
High.
That's
right?
why I think he's the fool of the week. He's the fool of the week. This is going to be his probably worst week, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know. This is the second game where they might have struggled.
He's not going to be perfect every week.
No one ever is, and he's, you know what? They have some good defenses coming up at the end of the season, but I do agree with you. I think this is probably one of his worst performances, and I think he's a superstar. He's a stud, so you don't have to worry about him. One guy I do think you really have to worry about. I know
That's why I brought it up.
I was really, really then great segue. I approve. I was so high on this player going into the season, and I actually tried trading for him in multiple dynasty leagues, but I am now waving the white flag, hitting the alarm button. I'm just out on Kyle Pitts. I mean, you're talking about this is week 4 now, and he's been basically doing nothing. I don't think he's received more than 5 targets in a game this season when I expected him to be essentially another wide receiver for this team. He's not creating separation, and not to mention in week 4, he put up not 1, not 2, but 0 catches on 3 targets and 0 fantasy points. I'll let you know later on in this podcast how that screwed me yet again, but right now he got 0.
Man, it's baffling a little bit because the athleticism and talent is very much there. You do hope the second half of the season better chemistry comes, but yeah, I'm with you, Mike. I might be waving the white flag and never really expecting him to be what we all hoped. For my bust of the week, my fool of the week, I should say. There you go, Tyler. Sorry, is actually Travis Etienne. So it's not that he's been bad. He's right now 26th RB on the season in half PPR leagues. However, he's probably not playing at the level you drafted him. He's barely an RB2. Like, he's high RB3 right now.
He's actually not, right?
He's in flex
at 26,
range.
He's not.
He's actually a flex play right now. And he's consistently been mediocre. Just like the rest of the Jaguars offense, except Brian Thomas Jr., who's freaking awesome. But I do hope better things are coming, but I am a bit worried about him.
Yeah, and they got a tough schedule coming up, I feel like, from a run side on the defense. But anyway, that was our trifecta for the week. And now we're going to dive further into week 4 matchups, how they went, who we noticed, what we're looking at. And starting off with the Thursday night football game, that was the Dallas Cowboys versus the Giants. Definitely good to see Neighbors erupt. He did get that concussion, so it is something to be monitored. But also, CeeDee Lamb actually blew it out of the water. You had Ferguson, who also proved he was a competent tight end. You also don't really have much QB strength. Dak actually performed, but Daniel Jones just continues to question. And Singletary did not do anything.
I think both of these quarterbacks just looked so average. That's just my opinion. But I mean, I really liked Jake Ferguson getting 7 targets. He's again probably the number 1 offense, the number 2 receiver in this offense. I think he's got good things coming for him. And Neighbors and Lamb, man, they're superstars.
Yeah.
But going into the Sunday night games now. Actually, this is Sunday afternoon because I can't seem to get times right. Cincinnati versus Carolina. Now,
this was a 1 p.m. game, Mike.
I know, afternoon game.
Oh, okay. Just making sure.
Afternoon game. Yeah. So Cincinnati and Carolina. We're looking at the Bengals defense. I'm just saying, I think they're in trouble. I think the Bengals defense is proving to be actually horrible, which may or may not be great for fantasy on their offensive weapons, but they are just a sieve and they're letting anybody score, including Carolina now. I do think Dalton is making the offense look great, but I still would have liked to have seen a better Bengals defense show up today. I'm loving Deontay Johnson, though. I think he's doing an absolute great job, and especially where you drafted him, if you still have him, he's going to be a league winner for your team if you have been fortunate enough to avoid the injury bug. Zach Moss, I still think is actually looking pretty damn good, and he's looking like a solid flex. And honestly, for fantasy-wise, are we hoping Anthony Richardson's out?
I don't know where you're getting Anthony Richardson out of this matchup, but we can talk about him later.
We'll talk about him later. You're right. I had the wrong note here. My bad.
Thank you for telling us all about.
Because yes, I hope he continues to sit out.
Nope, I was firmly just wrong.
Okay. Well, on that bombshell.
Moving on to another matchup. Who also doesn't have Anthony Richardson. It's the New Orleans-Atlanta matchup. Now, in this one, the really the interesting people are not the quarterbacks here. The mediocre people were the wide receivers, and the people who did what they typically do were the running backs. Kamara had another awesome week. Bajan is playing top 12, but I really thought he was going to make a bigger push to being number 1 overall.
You and me both, Jordan, by the way.
Yeah, like I think a lot of us did think that it was going to be like Brees Hall or Bajan number 1 if it wasn't CMC. Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins, stash him away on your bench. Maybe Derek Carr more so just because he's had success this season already.
He's a backup. That's it.
Yeah, neither quarterbacks on either of these teams were great, and I expect it to stay that way. It's really Olave, London, Bijan, and Kamara you're watching, and the kickers.
Are we finally starting to look to Raheem Shaheed as a guy we're trading for? Because he's probably drafted and not on the waivers. I'm starting to consider it, but I just don't trust Derek Carr or this offense.
Yeah.
I like Shaheed. Sorry, Jordan, I cut you off. I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead, Mike.
I like Shaheed as a play for he's a boom or bust guy, right? He's going to net you 15 plus fantasy points, or he's going to get you a nice 2. Like, if you are going for it, especially going into bye weeks, and you need someone who might be a game winner, he's that guy, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting it's an interesting player to look at. Going into the Jacksonville versus Houston game, we continue to see Nico Collins be the primary target in this offense. Diggs and Stroud continue to be totally lethal in that passing game. Obviously, Collins being the number 1 look, Diggs seemingly like he's the second. Sorry, Tank Dell. And from the Jacksonville side, you are seeing Christian Kirk emerge as a finally your fantasy relevant player after really of a bombshell of a first 2 weeks where he did absolutely nothing. And some guy that I think you might want to stash away, looking at how Travis Etienne Jr. has been performing, and that is Tank Bigsby. Might want to think about putting him in your bench if you have the room, because he could see a more significant role in the backfield.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's actually gotten scooped up on the waiver wire by a lot of people. It looks against Sleeper. He's rostered in 86% of leagues, but he's only started in 9%, which is probably about right. But Bigsby is an interesting person to maybe trade for if you're looking for some depth. Just maybe we'll see. But
solid pick there, Ty. Just especially because it fits back into my fool of the week with Etienne, who's supposed to be the lead back, not playing well. Bigsby's a solid guy to get now.
I would agree. Moving on to the next game, though, let's highlight the Denver Broncos and New York Jets.
Yeah.
Let's see. That's kind of bad.
Mike got
Only thing I'm taking out of this, Denver has a actually good defense, right? They are actually stopping a lot of these good offenses, including Garrett Wilson. And I tend to disagree with what Jordan is thinking. He might be a trade for candidate. He's not going to be traded for by myself. I just don't think he's going to be doing it. He has had multiple years, and he just can't seem to prove it.
Here's my theory.
Go for it.
Here's my theory. The Jets will trade for Devontae Adams, and this will open up Garrett Wilson more, and he'll be he'll be able to put up better points than he's putting up now.
Which means they literally just paid Mike Williams for nothing. I don't know. I think it might be a problem, but that's just me. Sutton is going to end up being somebody I think you got to just lose, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I had higher hopes.
You guys worried about Brees Hall?
No.
No.
Bad week.
Same. I think same.
Against as we established, a very good defense. It's like Rodgers and Brees Hall, I think, will both have better weeks. And moving on to our next matchup, we have Minnesota versus Green Bay. This was an awesome game. It started terrible. It was just a blowout. And then Packers made it really interesting in Jordan Love's comeback. This game is interesting because both QBs are borderline must-starts. I think Darnold is a must-start until proved otherwise this season. Same with Justin Jefferson. Now Addison starting to put up points. Love everybody got the ball. Kraft, Jaden Reed, Wicks. So I think pretty much both these offenses are pretty high-powered, and you want to be playing anyone you can from them.
I agree. It was great to see Jordan Addison come back. Justin Jefferson continues to prove us all wrong.
Mike disagrees.
No, I mean, it was good to see him come back. I don't know if this is going to continue as production, but I think it was great to see him come back off injury. And Darnold's just balling out. It's crazy.
He is.
I have nothing to say bad, actually, about the Minnesota Vikings. I think they're just looking absolutely stellar. What I do, I guess, disagree with is I think I'm finally getting to the point of Christian Watson's just not going to do it. I think he might actually be that guy to where the talents are there, the raw talent and the skills are there. He's just not going to be able to stay healthy, and he's being passed up by all the guys who can stay on the field at this point. So I think he is I think he might be the odd man out soon, and I still don't think Jacobs is being very efficient in my analysis. I just don't like how he's doing so far. I think he's getting all the volume, so he's absolutely still a play, but just
efficiency's
monitor
not
him.
great.
I actually disagree. Last game, his efficiency was 5.67 yards per carry. Week 1 was 5.25 yards per carry, and week 2 was 4.72. Week 3 was his down week. So I don't disagree. I think he's been underperforming from what you really wanted, given the amount of snaps percentage he's getting. But if this offense is competitive throughout the game, I think Jacobs is a confident high RB value.
You know, he doesn't have a single touchdown this season yet.
I know. That's what worries me. But that's the Packers and Vikings. Moving on to Pittsburgh Steelers versus Indianapolis Colts. Actually, also a pretty good game to watch. You did see Richardson go down, and we got to see the return of Joe Flacco. This guy being the old man, still in it. Good for you, dude.
We found Richardson.
We did find Richardson. Oh, I'm so relieved.
Yeah.
But
fun
Flacco...
fact about Joe Flacco. Anthony Richardson's mother is 10 days older than Joe Flacco.
It was 8.
8? Are you sure? I think it's 10.
It was 8. I heard the clip. 10. I bet you $5 outside of this podcast or in it.
All right. Well, the rest of the matchup, we did see an increase in utilization from those wide receivers, which if Flacco continues to play, I would definitely think we're getting confident starts out of Michael Pittman and Josh Downs, and same with Jonathan Taylor. Fields look good. We talked about him. Both Colts defense look good. Pittsburgh Steelers, this finally was a pretty down week for them, so it's interesting to see from a defensive perspective. So it's interesting if we're going to continue to look at those matchups, given how they performed against the Colts. But overall, great game.
I agree. Great game. I don't think it's a coincidence that Pittsburgh had their first down week defensively against Joe Flacco and a team that can pass the ball in short yardage.
Yeah.
So that's something I think you're going to have to monitor.
Yeah. And do we think that Justin Fields, this is a sign of things to come? Do we have higher hopes for George Pickens in this offense now? You know, how do we feel about Steelers moving forward?
We'll talk about it later on tomorrow's episode.
Oh, fair point.
Yes, we'll talk about it later on tomorrow's episode.
This is a recap, Jordan.
A preview for the audience.
I love the preview, but we'll go into the next game. That was a recap. So the Los Angeles Rams versus Chicago Bears. I just love looking at my favorite rookie quarterback. What can I say? God, he's just not good. He's actually getting DJ Moore frustrated at him. But that's just a sidebar. What I will say,
going to make a compilation of all our podcast episodes of you hating on Caleb Williams.
You have an entire podcast right there, full-fledged right there.
Hours.
But Kyren Williams is still looking awesome. Honestly, he's the only part in this offense looking awesome. So keep him in mind. As long as you can play a worse defense, like a lesser defense in the league, you might be able to look at Tutu Atwell until Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua come back. Tutu seems to get really be able to stretch the field, right? But he's really the only one I would be looking at as a receiver perspective. Caleb Williams, again, it's not working even with Keenan Allen coming back. So I think Keenan Allen was still rehabbing, but overall, the only thing I could say is play their defense and hope for their offense, because really DeAndre Swift, all these guys are just inconsistent. I think they'll all boom and I think they'll all bust.
Okay. Moving on to the next matchup, we got Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. Then with the Philadelphia side, I mean, you have pretty much sorry, wow. You've got Hurts and Barkley, who are must plays.
We're not talking about plays.
There.
We're talking about recap.
Yeah, they're must plays. They had awesome weeks. Okay.
Continue.
And then Irving, he's looking like he's taking over the spot from Rashad White more and more week by week, which was, predicted in the offseason that he was going to be a big candidate of taking over the RB1 spot. Now, on the Philadelphia side, Jalen Hurts, what's he looking like? Is he a trade for candidate, trade away candidate? He's still top 10. What do you think?
I think you still want him. I mean, even though he did come back and have a game, he didn't lose you the week, so I think you're still looking at him.
You are, but I will say this: he's only the QB 9 on the season, right? Like he's actually really underperforming. You needed better when you take him in the third round, your fourth round of your draft. You need better than QB 9, and he's just not getting the touchdowns that he was, and that's honestly all to do with Saquon.
I just want to say I'm still on my upset of the week streak. What up?
Tyler, that was a great call. I did not think you'd get that one, but I also didn't think you'd get most of them. So
Philly's offense just hasn't been as firepowered as you would want besides Barkley, but I think if they're healthy, you still got to play them.
Yeah. Moving on to New England versus San Francisco. Ramondre Stevenson continued to worries, did not have a great game. We did see Antonio Gibson have a better fantasy relevant game than Ramondre Stevenson. You really aren't, no one else on the Patriots surprised you from a fantasy perspective. 49ers side, you did see Debo return. Jennings continue to leads in yardage. Brandon Ayuk, we'll talk about him on the next episode, but definitely starting to think about pressing that panic button with how he's been performing. And Jordan Mason continues to prove that he is an absolute beast.
He's a
with
stud. Christian
McCaffrey out. He's absolutely a stud, and it's amazing to see how well he's performing in this offense.
Yeah, I think do you think it's the system or you think it's Jordan Mason?
Yes. I think it's both. It's an official both. I think Mason is just so hard to get down. And I think the system is just cut out, right? Like the 49ers always do this. They always have a backup guy just come right in. It's kind of like the Patriots used to be whenever Tom Brady would come out and they'd all of a sudden have a QB that would still look like he's going to light up the lamp, like light up the entire NFL. Jimmy Garoppolo got a job for 10 years because of it.
Yeah.
But we can go on to the next game. So I'm going to go into Washington and Arizona here. And I think, pardon my take, as much as I love Malik Neighbors, I think Daniels might be running away with Rookie of the Year. He is looking so good. His efficiencies are amazing. He's got the highest completion percentage of any rookie quarterback in the first 4 weeks of their careers. I think he's just looking stellar. Washington as a team, though, I think they might be plateauing. I just don't see I can't see this team actually succeeding this year, even on the backs of a great quarterback like him. I believe it'll end up coming down a little bit, but we'll see. On the other side of the ball, I do still expect higher things from Arizona. I am definitely concerned that this Washington defense held in check Marvin Harrison Jr., James Conner, Kyler Murray. These are guys I expected to put up really big fantasy point weeks, and they really didn't show up at all. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think the Washington Commanders, this is them rising. They are going to be a dominant force. They just need a better defense.
Yeah, they're on the rise for sure. I mean, their offense, they've got it figured out, it looks like. Dan Quinn will figure out
I'm
the
more
rest.
concerned about the defense, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, the defense concerns me a little bit that, they definitely aren't trustworthy right now to put in your starting lineup. But moving on to the next matchup, it was KC versus the LA Chargers. Now, this was an interesting game because, as Mike mentioned earlier, we had the major injury that took place pretty early. But, on Kansas City side, we saw a few players step up. Kelsey finally put up a top 5 tight end week with 12.4 points. And Xavier Worthy, he stepped up a little bit too and got a few more receptions. Then we're also looking at Kareem Hunt probably taking over that backfield. Now a few things on the LA side. Herbert wasn't great, but the other person who really disappointed was Dobbins. You were hoping for a better game than that. I'm not terribly worried about that moving forward. The other side on the thing on the LA side that looks consistent is their defense looks legit.
Yeah.
Then
I think
Yep.
Dobbins is going to be fine. I mean, he played two really, really tough matchups in the last 2 weeks, and that's why his efficiency numbers are down. I think he's going to be fine.
last boom for this week was you had Lad McConkey finally put up a wide receiver 2. I think he was 17th on the week. But he finally had a really solid week, and hopefully that's a sign of things to come.
I think it is. It's just sad that Kansas City, who is this 4-0 team, has every single game in the first 4 weeks have been within one score for that team, and I don't know. We'll get to it, but I think the Chiefs are a little
look at the Chiefs under Patrick Mahomes. He has so many wins by one score.
All right. Moving on to the Cleveland Browns versus Las Vegas Raiders. We do need to keep watching Cooper. He is continuing not to get what you drafted him for, and that is with Deshaun Watson behind him. So he definitely didn't perform where you want him, with only about 6 points, depending on your league format. Deshaun Watson also needs to be careful. You did see the ball go more to Judy than Cooper, and Watson continues just to take too many hits. He's playing really aggressive. He's just going to get injured again. The Raiders side of things, it looks like Alexander Madison is just performing at a higher level than Zamir White. We saw it this past game, and I'm wondering when they're going to make the switch, which is really disappointing for fantasy owners, especially those who drafted Zamir White, this guy. But hopefully you picked up Madison on the waivers. Last but not least, Trey Tucker and Jacoby Myers are still relevant with Gardner Minshew behind the helm. And I did say it last 2 episodes ago, Trey Tucker was a guy I said everyone should watch, and he's starting to show that he is a legitimate wide receiver. Past 2 weeks have been pretty well, good on his end. But with the return of Devontae Adams, we might see that go down again unless he gets traded. But overall, great game by the Raiders. They came out on top against the Browns.
Credit to you. I actually picked up Trey Tucker in a couple leagues because of you picking him up. I actually didn't really follow along with him, and he actually won my league. He won my league in one situation. He got a touchdown. It was really good. So thank you for helping me beat you. So moving on, though. So we're going to go to Buffalo and Baltimore. Now, I think Baltimore is just proving to be an absolute beast. It's going to be a fantastic team, and I think they might be Super Bowl favorites here coming into it outside of the Chiefs. Henry and Hill are both great running backs here. Hill is doing actually exceptional in the passing game. He's on track for 700 receiving yards as a running back. Fantastic. Mark Andrews, I think, might be a fantasy problem. He's not getting any looks, and he's blocking too much. He's being too good of a teammate. He's got to stop that. I need him on my fantasy team. But on the other side of the ball, Allen and Cook, not a concern. They're going to still be top tier, like we already talked about. And Kincaid, this is the most noticeable thing, I think, in this game. Kincaid is starting to look like that wide receiver one, or that first read target that we were seeing. He saw 7 targets, and I do believe he's going to keep going up.
Man, okay, so going on to the next matchup, we have Tennessee versus Miami. Not an exciting matchup. The kind that you went into thinking the only one maybe to start is the defenses. But, fun fact about this, in half PPR leagues, there's not a single wide receiver from either team that was top 50. Top 50.
Yeah, that's bad.
Now, here's the thing. The Tennessee side, that was expected. Miami, we'll see what they figure out. But we got to see Huntley in action for the first time. So he didn't look great. I still have high hopes for him. This is a guy who, did really well when they subbed him in for Lamar. And then Achane, who you would expect to maybe put up some points, also just not a great week. The only person who was really worth a start this week was Tony Pollard, who put up RB2 numbers, which is pretty much what you drafted him to do. Everyone else in this game sucked.
Yeah, boring game. And sorry, Mike, what were you saying?
I think Achane is honestly going to be in a little bit of trouble until they get a quarterback situation figured out. Until they can stretch the field out, Achane is going to be clogged up right at the line.
So
I agree.
Not only that, I was watching the game a little bit, and I noticed how often they were using Jalen Wright. They're like third string running back.
That's why.
It's just like they were testing Tyler Huntley, and Jalen Wright. So it's just like, is this just like a rebuild season? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, and for the more superior matchup of the week was Monday Night Football, the
What a game.
Seattle Seahawks versus Detroit Lions. Great game. Both offenses just continue to ball out. Seattle actually looked good, even though they got their loss. They did look good from an offensive side. The Lions, look, does their defense need some work? Sure, but their offense was able to carry them through this game by a mile. Amon-Ra, we talked about it. This was probably my favorite game matchup this entire season so far, with the catch by Jared Goff, and the perfect day for Jared Goff, and Amon-Ra St. Brown throwing the touchdown. Just overall great game. We also did see some Seattle guys come ahead. Geno Smith did really good, and so was DK Metcalf. And again, all of Detroit, you're on a lock. The running backs performed great. I think this is a time where you want to think about Sam Laporta. I don't think you worry yet, because he is still a high-valued tight end. Yes, he hasn't had a touchdown yet, but one is coming. I don't think I'm worried about him at all.
It was his best game. I agree with that. I think you want to keep him going. He had 53 yards, 4 receptions. Touchdowns are coming.
Yep.
Yeah, the good news for Detroit Lions fans is there's a lot of people in that offense who can contribute. The bad news for Sam Laporta fantasy owners, there's a lot of people in that Lions offense that can contribute. I wouldn't give up on him though yet.
But also, tight ends this season have just been disappointing in general. So he is still number 16.
I was going to say he might still actually be a top 12 player.
Yeah. So yeah, easily. But that was our week 4 recap and rewind. So now we're going to dive in to talk about very quickly the Duel of the Fools results from this past week. Starting off with the matchup, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Jackson pulled way ahead of that matchup. You had Jordan Mason, Zach Moss. Mason continues to be a powerhouse. J.K. Dobbins and Travis Etienne Jr. Not a very great Duel of the Fools, because they both underperformed significantly, but J.K. Dobbins surprisingly pulled ahead. James Cook, we talked about him. Alvin Kamara pulled up. Michael Pittman finally had a good game versus Zay Flowers. Mike Pittman came ahead. Malik Neighbors and Justin Jefferson. We had another tie. I cannot believe we had another tie.
How does this keep happening?
We almost had 2 ties this week, and we'll get to there in a second. So no points for that matchup. We had Terry McLaurin versus Tank Dell. Terry McLaurin came ahead. We talked about that Washington Commanders offense. They're looking scary. And last but not least, our tight end matchup. Like I said, almost a second tie, but Mike Gesicki had minus 0.4 points versus Kyle Pitts.
Right, and you picked
Kyle Pitts,
wrong.
0 points. So that gives us our overall week 4 results. I had 4 right. Mike, unfortunately, had a terrible week with 1. Good job, Mike. You're really pulling behind. And Jordan won the week with 5 correct picks.
Woohoo.
Leading us off, I'm in the lead with 17 correct guesses. Mike with 12. I'm sorry, Jordan with 15, Mike with 12. So Mike has moved now to last place, and we're all tied 2 weeks, 1 each. So we will dive into week 5 Duel of the Fools and go over those matchups in our next episode. Thank you for listening to 35. Hope you enjoy the new format, and we will be back later this week. Give us a like, follow, subscribe, and look to our next episode. Thanks, Fools, and have a great week. See you next week. See you, Fools.